Hi there, Stitchy friends. Welcome to another Flosstube video. I'm Kat from Catkin and Lily, and today's video is a project spotlight because if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I was getting very close to finishing a very large project, and it's finished, yay! So of course I wanted to share with you all about that because it was my very first really huge full coverage project. But let me show you it first and then I'll tell you all about it and how I stitched it. Okay, so I've got it here, and in fact I think I'm going to have to stand up and come back. There we go. I can just get it all in. I'll give you a little close-up just of some of it. Just look at that. Amazing detail. Yes, so that's the project. So that design is The Amazing Animal Kingdom, which is artwork by Amy Stewart, and it's been charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. And like I said, that's my first really huge full coverage project. And I was really drawn to stitch that one because I wanted something that had lots of colours in it, something that was going to keep my interest. I have seen so many beautiful, huge full coverage designs that look amazing, but I just think I'd get bored stitching them. And I have huge respect for anyone who can stitch these, but if it's lots of dark colours or lots of the same colours, I just wasn't sure it would keep my interest, particularly for my first one. So what I was looking for was something with lots of detail, lots of bright colours, and this one by Amy Stewart definitely fitted the bill, so it was absolutely perfect to choose that. So just to give you a few of the nitty-gritty details of the project, it was 700 by 535 stitches. So that's a total of 375,000 stitches. And it uses 90 colours, which actually I'm amazed you get so much detail and colour and everything else just with 90 colours. Actually, it's kind of amazing. Now, there are versions of this pattern that come with more colours and or in bigger sizes, but I think that would have been a bit overwhelming for my first project. And in fact, I don't think I would choose bigger ones or ones with more colours in future anyway. I think this one was absolutely fine. And the way it looks at the end is absolutely stunning. It doesn't need to be any bigger or more detailed or have more colours in it. It is absolutely perfect as it is. So I started this project on the 12th of October, 2019, and I finished it just very recently on the 17th of August, 2023. So that is 3 years and 10 months, or 1,405 days. Now, when I started stitching this, I put a really rough estimate, having really no good idea how long it would take, but I did a really, really rough estimate and thought it would probably take me about 5 years to stitch. So to bring it in under 4 years, yeah, that's really impressive. I'm really pleased that I've managed to do it a whole year quicker than I thought I perhaps would. So that's been amazing. Now, of course, there's a bit of choice when you start stitching a full coverage as to what fabric you use and what kind of stitches you make and how many strands you use. So I gave this quite a lot of thought because knowing I was going to be stitching on it for so long, I really didn't want to get it wrong and hate what I was stitching. Now, the go-to fabric usually for these full coverage designs is a 25 count even weave, and that is what I went for. And I think that's a nice compromise because I didn't want my stitches to be too big because A, the whole thing would be enormous when it was finished, and also the bigger the stitches are, kind of the more pixelated it looks. So I wanted a fairly small stitch size, and I was pretty happy that I could do it on 25 count. But I did test doing 1 strand or 2 strands. Now, some people do tent stitch, and I wanted to do full crosses, but I tried with 1 strand and I tried with 2 strands because I sort of thought that I would do it with 2 strands. But when I tested, and I'm really glad, I would always advise test something out if you're not sure, because you don't want to get partway into it and then realise that you've made a mistake. And in this case, I'm super glad I tested. And I did some samples with 2 strands, and I did some with 1 strand. And the coverage is better with 2 strands. But it was really horrible to stitch. It was so bulky, the stitches, that it didn't feel very nice to stitch. And I was talking to my mum about it, and she just said, you've got 375,000 stitches of this to do. Do not do anything that you're going to hate stitching. So I went with one strand, and it was definitely the right decision. I would say there are a few places where you've got dark colours that you can maybe see a peek of the fabric coming through, but I don't think it's going to matter. Nobody's going to be looking at it, up close. So, well, you might, but generally I'm much happier that I went with one strand. It was so much easier and nicer to stitch, and it still looks great at the end. So I think you have to test and see what works for you. If you would really rather have the coverage, then you could go with 2 strands. It just wasn't for me. Now, in terms of the threads, it's all DMC threads that are called for, and no way was I going to switch any of those. So absolutely all called for DMC threads. And I started out with a size 26 needle because that's generally my go-to. But actually, I switched to a size 28 because the count's so small, and it was much easier. And in fact, I switched to a really tiny little 28 as well, because they do vary slightly. And I was using a 28, but my mum said, oh, I've got some of these needles that my aunt had given to my mum. And they're really tiny little gold ones. I think they're a 28. And but they're a very small 28. And my mum had an entire bag of these. So she very kindly just donated me a few of those. And I think I've got through about 2 or 3 because they're so tiny and so fine. I did get through a few needles in the course of the project because they did break. This is the only time I think I've had needles break on me actually is using the 28s because they're so tiny and fine. They did just bend and eventually break. But I still only used, I think it was 3 needles over 375,000 stitches. So I think I got good life out of each of those needles. So I wanted to talk a bit about how I stitched it because again, so many different variations on this, and probably the biggest difference from my stitching to a number of other people's is that I always stitch in hand, and I didn't change that even for this huge project. I did wonder if a frame might be helpful, but I really enjoy stitching in hand, and I managed to stitch this entire project in hand with no problems whatsoever. Now, that does mean there's a lot of fabric to deal with. So what I would do was roll it up from both ends and clip it. So I had a working section kind of in the middle. I've got a small one here I can show you. So it's like this. I've basically rolled up from one side and I've just used these little clips. And then I've rolled up the other side and again I've clipped it. So I would have a working section in the middle. So I could basically roll one end in and unroll the other end and basically move my way along. So like that, but obviously on a much bigger scale. And then I would just sit and generally rest the fabric. I would sit with my legs out in front of me, rest the fabric kind of on my lap, just have that working section there for me and work like that. That's probably not going to work for everybody, but I really enjoyed stitching it that way. So I decided that I was going to start stitching it from the top left-hand corner. And yes, that does mean that I had to work out where it is on the fabric. But I don't think you can really start these patterns in the middle. I'm curious if anyone's ever started such a huge design in the middle, then let me know. But I figured a corner start was probably the best. And here's the corner I started on, so the top left-hand corner. And you can see I left myself really quite a good big border on it. And by the way, this border, if you can see, oh my goodness, so frayed. Well, I promise I actually did stitch all the way around the edge of my fabric at the start, but I've been stitching it for so long that it all just came off and just frayed away anyway. So I'm not sure there's much point doing that, to be honest, because if you've got that much of a border on it, I don't even know if it's really worth preparing it, because there's going to be plenty there to work with for the framer anyway. So because I had that much border, if I was a little bit off with my design placement on the fabric, then I was probably going to be fine anyway, even if I was an inch or so off. And I wasn't, it was absolutely fine. I got it in the middle, so yay. I also don't really do anything super special when I'm stitching such a huge project. I just worked, as I say, from that top left corner, and I just worked kind of across and down. And I did work, because there's 4 shelves to it, I did work each shelf at a time. But other than that, so I just kind of worked one shelf all the way across and then the next shelf all the way across. But I didn't grid my fabric. I didn't do any parking of my threads. I didn't do any extreme cross country and stick with one colour and do it all the way across. I just like to work the next bit that comes up on the pattern. So I'm constantly working across. I don't really like to leave gaps. My brain likes to work with it all filled in. Now, that's not really super possible with this, but generally I prefer to work that way. So yeah, no kind of colour completing for me and working that all across the design. That just doesn't work for my brain. So I just work my way across. Now, I did use the Pattern Keeper app rather than a paper pattern, because the paper pattern is, I can't quite remember, but I think it's about 80 pages long. So no way was I printing it off and working from a paper pattern. Oh my goodness, if you do it from a paper pattern, you are an absolute legend, because I couldn't work from that. For something like this, with stitches here, there and everywhere, I really don't see how I could have done it if I hadn't had the Pattern Keeper app, so that I could keep track of where I was, mark everything off super easily. You can highlight so you can see which stitches that you're going to be doing of a particular colour, and then mark them off as you go. Yeah, no way could I have done it without that. It was just absolutely brilliant. So highly recommend that app. So that's Pattern Keeper. And I also took the number of stitches that I stitched per day from Pattern Keeper. At the end of the day, whatever I'd stitched, I put it into another app called STITCHY, and that just kept track of how many stitches I'd done when I reached certain percentages, and any photos that I took of progress along the way, you can pop them in there as well. So that's just quite a nice little record to keep to go with it, really. And the other thing I did that was quite fun was that when I'd got the pattern, I'd chosen the pattern, started stitching it, I did not go back and look at the original design after I'd purchased it and started stitching. So it was all a complete surprise what was coming up. So my husband and I, we used to play Guess the Animal, because I'd be stitching something and I'm like, oh, is this a bit of foliage? Is this a creature? What creature is this? And yeah, it was fun. We'd be like, oh, it's a monkey. So everything I stitched was a big surprise to me, and I had quite a lot of fun with that. So I wouldn't normally really have any stats on my cross stitching, but because I put the number of stitches from Pattern Keeper and put it into the StitchPal app, then that gave me an average stitches. So my average for this project over the whole thing was 266 stitches per day. So that's quite a lot. I can average about 200 stitches per hour. So 260, yeah, I probably did stitch then on average, maybe an hour and a half a day. So I guess that's quite a lot. But surprisingly, within that, I only stitched over 1,000 stitches on 5 days. So very rarely did I stitch a really, really huge amount. And even when I did do over 1,000, I think it was only just over. I find it hard to do much more than that in a day because my eyes just get really tired and I have to kind of get up and do other stuff as well. So the other thing I did while I was stitching it was that I took a photo at every 1% of completion. I missed the first couple because I hadn't thought of it. And then I thought, oh, it'd be lovely to take a photo every 1%. So from 3% onwards, I have a photo at every 1%, apart from somewhere around 56%. I think I missed one. I have no idea why. I think I got really excited. I'd stitched way past the percentage, completely forgot to take the photo. So yeah, there's one missing and the first 2. But other than that, I have a photo for every 1%. So I stitched those all together so you can enjoy the time lapse of stitching my Heaven and Earth designs. And the other little stat from that was that I missed 53 days. So out of my 1,405 days of stitching, I only missed stitching it on 53 days. So I really did manage to stitch it almost every single day for those nearly 4 years. That's less than 4% of the days during that time when I didn't stitch on this project. So you can see how much I was loving it. And talking of loving it, I was thinking about what were the things I loved most about it. And I think the main thing has just got to be the sheer satisfaction of completing a project that size. It really is, it's incredible. I really genuinely feel very proud of myself for having done it. I really enjoyed stitching it. And yeah, I'm super proud of it. In terms of my favourite bits, I was thinking about this. I'm not sure I can find any favourite bits because every bit I stitched, every new animal that I stitched, that was my favourite. But I do think maybe the rainbow at the top. Shall I show you the rainbow again? This section just here, this section with the rainbow and the blue sky and the sunshine and those lovely ocean waves, that maybe was my favourite bit, if I really had to pick one. The other thing I loved was seeing all the zeros pop up at the end. That was very exciting because on the Pattern Keeper app, every time when you get to the end, and it was really only in the last few percent that I had zeros popping up. It was crazy. I was on like 95% I think before I even got any zeros. And then it pops up as a 0. I would like some confetti on there maybe, that would be nice, but yeah, it was still nice seeing it pop up as zeros. That was quite fun. I quite enjoyed that. Now there wasn't much that I didn't love about this project. It is quite confetti heavy in parts, and yeah, it's not the most fun to stitch, but it's kind of part of it, and I just took it. Sometimes it was blocks of colour and you could kind of fly through it, and sometimes it was a bit more confetti heavy. I think the bits that I perhaps really didn't like very much, I like the finished result, but the bits that were hardest to stitch were, there were a few sort of small motifs, usually brightly coloured butterfly or a bird. I'll try and find a picture to pop in to show you what I mean, where there was maybe a small area of sort of 30, 40, 50 stitches with about 30 different colours in it. So it's like 1 or 2 stitches of 30 different colours, all in this tiny motif. And yeah, it's not the most fun to stitch. But it is worth it for the finished effect. So you just kind of suck it up and go, well, hey, that's fine. I'll do this, and then I can do this bit over here that's a nice block of colour. So kind of take a break from that. And now it's finished, I just have to wash it. That's going to be interesting. I think it might fit in the sink, otherwise it's going in the bath. And I think I'm going to need to get my hubby to help me rinse it out with the shower head. Once I finally get that done, washed and ironed, then I'm going to take it to the framers and maybe have a sit down when he tells me how much it's going to cost, but it will absolutely be worth it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to get it framed. I think I know where I'm going to hang it, but obviously it's going to be really big, so I think when it's done, I'll just walk around the house, kind of offer it up and see where it looks good, but I do have a potential spot all picked out for it, but we'll see. I'll show you where it ends up eventually. And the big question, I guess, is, am I going to do another one? Well, as I was coming towards the end of that one, I was thinking about this, and yes, absolutely, I'm going to do another one. But I did think maybe I'd take a short break and work on some other projects. I've got quite a few sort of smaller to medium-sized projects, and I thought, oh, it'd be nice to work on these. But I feel really lost without a huge focus project. It's really weird, but I guess maybe not, because I've been stitching this for nearly 4 years, and it feels really strange not to have that one huge project that I try and put in a few stitches every single day. So I was like, yes, okay, I have to start another one. But then it was a case of what do I do? Because of course, over the 4 years, I've been seeing so many amazing designs. In fact, when I bought the Amy Stewart pattern for this one, I bought 2 other Amy Stewart designs at the same time. So I actually had 2 other Heaven and Earth designs. I could pick one of those. And I do adore the Amy Stewart patterns. They are so gorgeous. But I kind of thought maybe I should pick something different. Not should. There's no should about it, actually. That's a silly thing to say, because if that's what I wanted to stitch, then I absolutely would stitch that. I just wanted to try maybe a slightly different one, and maybe I'll go back to an Amy Stewart one again afterwards, because they are really amazing. But there's this one I've been seeing, and my brain just keeps coming back to it. And I thought, if I'm this fixated on it, I think this might have to be the next project. And on the plus side, it's smaller. It's actually only just over half the size of the one I've just finished. So should only take me, should again, hopefully will only take me maybe 2 years. So that would be amazing. Okay, I won't keep you in suspense. I'm going to put a picture up here to show you. It's called Chromatic Dragon. The artwork is by Mikey Bergman, and this one's been charted by Pain-Free Crafts. I am so excited to start this. I have ordered the fabric and the threads. So yeah, I will be showing you more about that one when I do some kind of whip update. Okay, well, if I've left anything unanswered about how I stitched my very first, very large full coverage design, then please just drop me a comment, let me know, and I will answer those for you. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about this project as much as I enjoyed stitching it, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.